You are standing where the road seems to drink the morning and give nothing back. Dust hangs like breath that refuses to leave. A line of men moves as if pulled by a thread through the throat of the day, boots scuffing, canteens empty, eyes low not from shame but from the weight of heat. A guard's bayonet glints once and then goes dull again, as if the sun is embarrassed to be seen in it. Before you drift off, take a moment to subscribe, but only if stories told in whispers are your kind of thing. Tell us where you're listening from, or which image lingers with you the most. You breathe. Dust answers. Engines murmur. A line of men flows around a puddle, as if the puddle were a fallen comrade. A crow calls twice and does not apologize. You're listening to echoes of war. You do not know the name of this place yet, only that the air has a flavor, metal, salt, something burnt and stubborn. Palm fronds lift and settle with the rhythm of a tired lung. Somewhere a truck coughs and keeps coughing. The sound joins the line of men and becomes part of the march, like a drum that has forgotten its song and beats anyway. Even without words, orders travel. Hands flick, rifles tilt, and the river of bodies adjusts around potholes and thorns. A canteen tips. A single drop falls and darkens dust. A small eclipse, a brief mercy. The man who owns the drop keeps walking, because stopping has been taught out of him by the last hour, and the hour before that, and the hour before that. You taste quiet. But it is not peace, only the kind of quiet that grows in places where speaking has no use. Wind shrugs in from the bay. It brings with it the smell of brackish water and the distant complaint of gulls who do not know the calendar. Far ahead, a checkpoint waits with the patience of a rock, and behind it the road continues, thin as a decision. There is another sound under the boots and growling engines. Paper. Paper sliding, paper naming, paper promising. Orders drafted far from this heat. Maps that drew straight lines through jungles that never agreed to be straight. You do not see the paper, but you feel how it touches these men all the same, ink turning into hunger, signatures into miles. A man to your left counts beneath his breath. Not the days, those have come loose from their nails, but steps. He counts because numbers are steadier than hope. He stops at 100, then begins again, building a small house out of repetition, a place to put his mind while his body is borrowed by the road. A fly lands on your lip. You do not brush it away. You save the motion for walking, for balance, for the tiny economy of muscles that keeps you upright. Somewhere in the column, a canteen shrieks against a belt hook. Metal on metal, the leitmotif of captivity. Now the pace loosens, breath lengthens, and the story drifts wider. You look up and discover the sky is a pale bowl, too bright to be an answer. Jungle presses at the road's edges, banana leaves with their torn, green flags, bamboo whispering in a language made of friction. Water glitters in ditches, but is not for you. Every glimmer is a lesson in distance. You are standing in a camp that should not exist, then not standing in a camp, then standing again at a crossroad guarded by faces that pretend to be stone. The wind lifts a scrap of song from somewhere, Tagalog, Ilocano, English, a prayer in a private grammar, and places it back down, gentle as a mother with a sleeping child. The song does not last. What lasts is heat, and the knowledge that moving is safer than asking. We will name this soon, because names matter. But first, we let the weather do its work in memory. April light that turns noon into a hammer, the smell of camphor and mildew in abandoned field tents, mangrove shadows flickering across faces like the bars of a cell, the clink of dog tags described not by sight but by weight on the sternum. Years later they will call this day what it is. For now, it's simply the day that keeps happening, yard by yard. Beyond the wire, beyond the ditches and bamboo, the forest keeps its silence like a bargain. Somewhere radios that could not save anyone still tick, cooling. Somewhere a general signs a paper that recognizes what the body already knows, that resistance has become a different shape. Somewhere a lighthouse blinks an innocent rhythm at a bay filling with ships that do not speak your language. Chapter 1: Peninsula Without Shadow, The Fall of Bataan. A map drawn in thirst. You stand on a peninsula that no longer believes in mornings. The air is heavy with metal and wet leaves, a jungle exhaling its patience. Even the birds sound uncertain, their calls blunted by heat. Bataan lies between two bodies of water, the West Philippine Sea whispering on one side, Manila Bay sighing on the other. It should have been a refuge, a green bastion where soldiers might catch their breath. Instead, it became a funnel. Everything, men, hopes, gun barrels, poured toward its narrow tip and found only salt. For 3 months the jungle has been your ally and your judge. It hides foxholes with its ferns, conceals batteries in its ribs, but it also feeds mosquitoes fat on fever. The ground itself is soft, remembering rain even when there is none. When you dig a trench, the earth breathes out rot and the ghosts of fruit. Each night artillery glows across the bay like lightning that never quite reaches thunder. Ships you cannot see answer with throats of flame. You mark time by the cough of distant guns and the thin whistle of supply planes that never land. Rations thin into arithmetic, one biscuit divided, one sip of water measured by faith. Inside the command caves, maps sprawl under kerosene lamps. The red pencil lines have blurred into rivers of sweat. Every hour someone erases an arrow that once promised reinforcements. Outside, men whisper MacArthur's name as both prayer and rumor. He has gone to Australia, they say, to return later. The promise feels like paper left in the rain, legible for a moment, then gone. General King looks older than his medals, his signature already trembling inside his hand. Wainwright holds what's left of the defense like a man cupping a candle in wind. Across the lines, General Homer writes of victory with a poet's neat handwriting, unaware that his triumph is walking barefoot through the mud toward him. You inhale. The air tastes of chlorinated streams that no one dares drink from. Your tongue is a map too. Dry valleys, bitter mountains, no rivers. Somewhere behind the lines, a Filipino medic stirs rice into watery porridge for the last patients in a field hospital. He hums an old Kundiman song that slides between minor notes. His hands tremble from fever, but he keeps ladling. The sound of the spoon in the tin bowl is steady, almost the sound of rain you remember. The last water of Obuque. At Obuque and Pilar the front has collapsed into exhaustion. The foxholes are half water, half prayer. You see a man scoop a handful of mud and press it to his lips, not to drink, just to feel the idea of coolness. Trucks rattle past with their ribs showing, each one a moving confession. The wounded cling to their sides as if to the hulls of ships. The lucky climb aboard. The rest form a line that begins with obedience and ends with inevitability. The air hums with flies. They do not know the difference between victory and surrender. A nurse ties her last bandage with a strip torn from her own skirt. A priest blesses canteens instead of bodies. When you close your eyes, the sun still burns through the lids in blood-colored patterns. Orders come down. Destroy nothing. The order is strange. So many things already destroyed, but it means the surrender is hours away. You watch men bury ammunition they will never fire, turn over engines that will never run, and sit down to write their names on scraps of paper in case someone needs to remember them later. The wind rises from the sea, carrying salt into wounds. A corporal mutters that the wind is a spy. Another says it is mercy disguised as pain. Both could be right. When darkness falls, the jungle glows faintly with fireflies. They drift over foxholes like lanterns searching for owners. Someone begins to whistle an American tune and stops midway. The notes hang, embarrassed, above the palms. The signature and the silence. April 9th, 1942. Major General Edward King Jr. signs the document that ends the defense of Bataan. He does not call it surrender. He calls it necessity. He signs for 76,000 soldiers, American and Filipino, and for the civilians caught between the armies. The ink is still wet when the guns stop. What follows is not silence but a rearrangement of noise. The buzz of insects reclaiming their territory, the creak of boots shifting weight, the distant clang of captured rifles stacked like fallen scaffolding. Japanese officers photograph the moment. Their cameras click like small, polite detonations. The lens captures none of the smell, the mixture of sweat, cordite, and decay, or the texture of defeat, which feels oddly like relief at first. King removes his hat. He expects anger from his men, but finds only vacancy. They stare at the sea as if the horizon might erase them. One whispers, "At least it's over." But it isn't. It is only beginning to rename itself. Homer's headquarters receives the news with measured satisfaction. Orders spread outward through interpreters, down through officers, to NCOs, to guards. Each translation sheds a layer of mercy. By the time the orders reach the road, they are simpler. Move them north. A peninsula exhales. Bataan exhales through the mouths of the captured. It exhales dust, disbelief, and the faint smell of burned coconut husks. Columns form under a sun already bright enough to bleach memory. A whistle blows. It sounds like a knife being drawn. You join the line. The road ahead is a pale scar winding between jungle and shore. Somewhere behind you, ammunition dumps smolder under their own confusion. In front of you, guards adjust bayonets that catch every glint of morning like accusations. The first mile feels like reprieve. The second tastes of rust. By the third, the road has learned your weight and begins to remember it. A Filipino scout beside you recites the names of rivers under his breath. Pasig, Pampanga, Ogno, as if calling on water might summon it. He stops when the guard strikes him across the shoulder with a rifle butt. The sound is not loud. The silence that follows is. At Marival's, the column swells until it becomes geography. Civilians watch from doorways, their faces blank from rehearsed indifference. A girl drops a mango into the dust. No one bends to pick it up. The fruit rolls once, bruised gold, then splits, its scent of sweetness cut by rot. You think of how the word march once belonged to music. Now it belongs to thirst. That night you sleep sitting, your back against another man's shoulder, the two of you propping each other up like architecture. In dreams you hear the sea climbing the shore to whisper, "Walk, walk, walk." At dawn a rooster crows somewhere inside the jungle. The sound startles everyone. It is the first honest thing you've heard in days. The chapter closes on a quiet image. A single boot print filling slowly with dew, the sun bending down to drink from it. Chapter 2. The Long Column. Orders that don't drink water. The road begins before you wake. It hums under bare soles, under boots split at the seams, under the shuffle of 70,000 men who have forgotten the difference between dawn and exhaustion. The order is simple. Move north, but simplicity is a cruelty here. Every voice that passes it down strips away a layer of understanding until only movement remains. The column organizes itself as instinct does. Bodies following bodies, a tide obeying gravity. You walk through air that feels chewed and spat out by the sun. Each breath scrapes. Heat pools in the hollows of your collarbone behind your knees, inside the fabric of your shirt. Sweat becomes salt, salt becomes dust, dust becomes skin. The road is lined with acacia and smoke. Somewhere beyond the trees, a carabao lows, a slow, bewildered sound that makes even the guards glance sideways. A truck full of captured rifles passes, barrels pointing backward like a warning to memory. Orders drift along the line in broken English and sharper Japanese. No stop. No water. Keep go. A guard gestures with the flat of his sword, and the gesture carries more weight than the steel. You learn a new grammar made only of direction. Villagers appear like ghosts at the edge of vision. Some hold tin cups, others nothing at all. When they step forward, bayonets bloom between them and the line, metal flowers without fragrance. They retreat, the dust swallowing them as quickly as it released them. You swallow air until it tastes like brass. It is the only thing free. Discipline and its absences. Discipline is supposed to be symmetrical, but here it wobbles like heat over asphalt. Some guards keep perfect rhythm, their boots clicking like metronomes of empire. Others walk with the slack gait of men who have outpaced belief. One hums a song, short, high, and lonely, and for a moment the march sounds almost human. Japanese soldiers had been told this was a victory procession. What they see instead is contagion. Ragged prisoners who do not fall fast enough, who stink of malaria and defeat. The smell offends them. Their orders are to keep the line pure of hesitation. You hear a gunshot somewhere up the column. The sound travels back through the crowd like a rumor. Nobody asks who it was for. The knowledge is already communal. A Filipino sergeant collapses beside you, his knees buckling in prayer that never finds words. Two guards drag him to the ditch, the movement efficient, almost bored. When they return to the road, they wipe their bayonets clean with leaves that will curl before noon. The lesson is clear, but even obedience has a temperature. Under this heat, everything softens. Orders, hate, will. A few guards start using rifle butts instead of bullets. One, younger than he looks, keeps glancing at the horizon as if expecting someone to forgive him from there. Flies buzz around the edges of thought. The sound is intimate, like whispers you can't answer. By midday, discipline becomes thirst's accomplice. Men march with tongues thick as cork. Lips split and bleed in quiet symmetry. Someone begins to chant names, of rivers, of saints, of cities with fountains. It helps for a while, then hurts more. Crosscut, a villager at Balanga. At Balanga, a woman stands in the doorway of her nipa hut, clutching a clay jar of water that is already hot from the sun. She has watched the line for hours. The shuffling rhythm, the guards' angled shadows, the slow punctuation of gunshots farther up the road. When the column reaches her gate, she lifts the jar and steps forward. A guard raises his rifle, not to fire, only to warn, and the motion stops her breath. Then wind stirs dust across his face. He coughs, blinks, looks away. In that instant she tips the jar, letting a thin ribbon spill into the ditch. A prisoner at the edge of the column falls to his knees. He cups the muddy water and drinks, then looks up at her without expression. The guard turns back, sees nothing but dust, and laughs at his own imagination. The woman retreats inside, heart hammering louder than the march outside. Later she will scrub the jar 3 times and still smell metal on her hands. Voices inside the noise. You begin to measure time by sound. Boots. Pause. Boots. A truck backfires. A body hits the road with the thud of a dropped sack. A guard yells a word you don't understand but learn by tone. Keep moving. The road itself starts speaking. It creaks under weight, sends pebbles skittering like Morse code. Somewhere behind, someone prays in Spanish, the rhythm steady as a drum. Dios mío, Dios mío. It blends with English curses and Tagalog lullabies until language becomes weather. A Japanese private walking beside the column keeps count of steps on a slip of paper. He means to report mileage later. After 50 paces, he loses count and tears the paper into tiny squares. They flutter down like pale insects and stick to sweaty backs until rain, or something pretending to be rain, washes them away. You notice patterns. Every mile, someone's legs refuse to bargain. Every few minutes, a canteen clinks, a sound sharper than any cry. When the lid rattles, dozens of heads turn, instinct stronger than discipline. One man pours a spoonful of water into his palm and offers it to the soldier beside him. They share it the way light is shared through a crack, wordlessly, completely. Cross-cut. The letter home. That evening, in a field 10 miles behind, a Japanese corporal writes to his wife. He begins formally, as the manuals require. Dearest, the Emperor's will is victorious. Then he hesitates. His handwriting falters over the word victorious. He stares at the ink until it dries into a dull bruise on the page. Outside, prisoners pass on the road, silhouettes against the lantern light, so many that the line seems endless, a human river moving through his dreams. He does not write about them. He writes about the moon, about how it looks the same here as in Yokohama. He signs the letter and folds it carefully. When he looks up again, the column has vanished into darkness, but he can still hear the boots, the coughs, the sound of thirst thinking aloud. Night and its permissions. Darkness arrives like permission to remember who you are. The guards slow. The air cools enough to carry thought. Men collapse where they stand, some sleeping upright, others sinking to their knees as if in prayer. The stars above Luzon are fierce and close. Fireflies blink between branches, mimicking far-off gunfire. A prisoner hums a hymn his mother taught him. Another answers with a line from a marching song. The two tunes find each other halfway and merge into something unrecognizable but true. In the dimness, one guard lights a cigarette. He inhales deeply, then passes it to the prisoner nearest him, a small defiance of every rule he has been taught. The ember travels hand to hand like a shared pulse until it disappears. For a few breaths, smoke and mercy are the same thing. Somewhere down the road, a body burns. The smell folds itself into the night air and becomes another kind of memory. You do not look. You keep walking inside your half-dream, counting the stars instead of the steps. Dawn finds the column. By dawn the line stretches 10 miles long. From a distance it looks orderly, ants on a pale ribbon of earth. Up close it is chaos disciplined by fear. Men lean on one another, trading balance the way children trade marbles. Guards bark, bayonets flash. The sun repeats its daily betrayal. A carabao cart creaks past loaded with rifles, and for a heartbeat you imagine they are walking sticks, harmless wood instead of iron. Then a guard laughs, and the thought breaks. The horizon wavers in heat. Hills rise ahead, Oroni, Lubao, names that sound like breaths, and beyond them San Fernando, where the march will twist into another shape. You hear the sea no longer. You hear only your own pulse. It tells you the truth that no map dares print. This road is longer than the island, longer than war, longer than reason. The quiet inventory. At rest stops that aren't rest, you take inventory. 2 blisters, 1 missing button, 1 memory of rain. You trade a pin for a swallow of water and wonder if you should have asked for more. Someone nearby counts in Japanese. Ichi ni san, until the numbers slide into nonsense. A lizard darts across the road, its tail sketching something indecipherable in dust. You follow it with your eyes until a boot erases the line. The erasure feels honest. By mid-morning, fatigue becomes landscape. You no longer walk on ground, you walk on time itself, each step another minute worn out of existence. The cuff button. The road narrows between two fields of dry sugarcane. Wind shivers through the stalks with the hiss of pages turning. You see a glint in the dust, a cuff button, brass, still warm from a body you will not see again. You stoop, pick it up, and turn it in your fingers. The letter stamped on it, perhaps U for United States, perhaps unreadable, catches the light and throws it back at the sky. You pocket it without thought, the smallest act of salvage against forgetting. The column moves on. From a distance the glint vanishes. From inside, it remains, pressing faintly against your thigh like a heartbeat you've borrowed. The chapter ends on a quiet image, the button resting in your palm that night, its warmth finally gone, leaving only the cool weight of memory. Chapter 3. Checkpoint Lessons. The bridge. The road hesitates before a river. You can hear the water before you see it, its soft argument with the stones, its lazy folding around roots. The current glints between bamboo stalks, a promise of coldness that feels like cruelty. Then the bridge appears, timber planks, nailed too thin, trembling under weight. Guards wave the column forward. Men cross in groups of 50, shoulders brushing, boots drumming a tired percussion. Below, the river keeps speaking in its native tongue. Run, forget, run. Halfway across, the line stalls. Someone has fallen. You don't see who. The man behind pushes, the man ahead resists, and for a moment the bridge groans under indecision. A guard shouts. His voice cracks like a whip through the heat. You look down. The water is close enough to taste. It moves with the grace of things that have never known captivity. For a heartbeat you imagine stepping off, letting it carry you anywhere but forward. The fantasy ends when a rifle but digs between your shoulder blades. You move. On the far bank, a soldier kneels and vomits bile the color of rust. No one stops. The bridge shakes again as the next group crosses, the boards clicking like teeth. By the time you glance back, the river has swallowed its reflection and looks empty, as if ashamed to witness what it just carried. Water discipline. In the first days you learned to ration courage. Now you ration thirst. Water discipline, they called it that, back when rules still had classrooms. Sip only at dawn and dusk. Wet the lips but do not swallow. Keep the cork clean. Pretend control. Your canteen is almost a relic now, its dented sides holding more dust than mercy. You tilt it against your mouth and count silently. 1, 2, 3, stop. The swallow feels like betrayal. Beside you, a Filipino lieutenant mutters advice he learned from a grandfather. Think of fruit with thick skin. Mango, santal, guava. Your body will believe you are eating it. You try. The mind obeys for a moment, conjuring sweetness and shade. Then the taste collapses into iron. When guards shout mizu, water, the column freezes, conditioned like animals to both hope and dread. Sometimes it means a puddle aloud, sometimes a trap to watch who breaks rank. The punishment for thirst is demonstration. You see it once. A man kneels by a ditch, scooping filthy water. 2 guards drag him out, laughing. They make the rest of the line watch as he is forced to swallow handfuls of mud until his mouth stops working. Then they walk on, leaving him upright like a monument the road built. After that, even the sight of water hurts. Crosscut. A Japanese private writes home. Far behind the column, in a village turned garrison, a Japanese private crouches under a thatched awning and writes by the light of a kerosene lamp. He is 20 years old, from Nagano, with fingers stained by the grease of his Arisaka rifle. He writes to his mother, "We have taken many prisoners. They walk calmly. The sun is strong, but we endure it." He does not write about the smell. He does not write about the look in the prisoner's eyes, or the sound a man makes when he drops from heat and is left to bake where he falls. Instead he writes about home, the persimmons ripening, the sound of rain on tile roofs, the mountain that always looked like it was bowing. He ends with a line from a poem he learned in school. Even in victory, the cicada sings of emptiness. When he folds the paper, sweat from his palms smudges the ink. He doesn't notice that the word emptiness has blurred into something unreadable. The letter will never reach Japan. It will be found months later in his pack at a burial site near San Fernando. The poem will be intact. The signature will not. The schoolyard. At dusk, the march halts near a school in the town of Orion. The checkpoint becomes a corral. Guards herd prisoners into the yard where children once learned multiplication. The blackboard still carries an unfinished equation. 6 times 8 is equal to. Someone lies down in its shadow and whispers, 48. No one answers. The arithmetic of this place has changed. Chalk dust floats in the humid air. Benches lie overturned, desks splintered. In one corner, a pile of textbooks smolders where a guard tried to make light. The pages twist and blacken, releasing the smell of sugar and glue. A prisoner finds a piece of chalk and writes on the board beneath the equation, April 10th. He underlines it once, slowly, the line wobbling like a pulse. When a guard notices, he wipes it away with his sleeve but leaves a faint white scar on the slate. In the classrooms, men curl on the floor. Some sleep instantly, others whisper about the next checkpoint as if the future were a rumor that needs retelling to survive. A chaplain kneels beside a desk and traces a cross on the wood grain with his finger, careful not to let the guards see. You sit against the wall and watch a gecko hunt insects near the ceiling. Its tongue flickers in silence, efficient and patient. You envy its hunger. It knows what to look for. The night lesson. Midnight. A shout splits the air, followed by the slap of boots. A man who slipped past the wire in search of water is dragged back by 2 guards. They force him to kneel in the center of the yard. The prisoners lift their heads but say nothing. One guard speaks softly, almost gently, before raising his rifle. The sound that follows is short, mechanical, and absolute. The echo bounces off the blackboard, rattles through the windows, and settles into the soil. A teacher's bell lies half buried near your foot. It trembles once, rings faintly, then is still. The next morning the body is gone. Only a wet circle remains where the earth remembers him. The guards make the men march around it on their way out, a reminder written in dust. You step carefully, not to avoid the spot, but to acknowledge it. The ground feels cooler there. Crosscut. The radio that listens. Across the bay, in the tunnels of Corregidor, a radio operator sits before a silent transmitter. The set's green light has gone dim, its voice throttled by orders not to reveal position. He turns the knobs anyway, listening to static that sounds like rain falling on tin roofs. Sometimes he imagines he can hear the march, boots against gravel, the rhythm of exhaustion, carried faintly through the noise. He writes coordinates that mean nothing anymore, notes the temperature, files a report no one will read. The war has moved without him, but he stays at his post, waiting for a signal that will never come. Above ground, the sea licks the shore as if testing the taste of defeat. Morning at the crossroads. When dawn comes, it does not rise, it seeps. Mist rolls off the rice fields, cool for a few breaths before the sun burns it away. The guards whistle, the column awake. Men stumble to their feet, joints creaking like rusted hinges. The road forks ahead, one branch toward Balanga, one toward Oroni. Both smell of sweat and diesel. You realize that direction no longer matters. All paths lead north, and north means hunger. At the checkpoint, a Japanese officer inspects the line. His uniform is immaculate, his boots polished to the color of discipline. He watches as prisoners shuffle past, expression unreadable. Then, almost imperceptibly, he turns away, not from disgust, but from recognition. For a second, he looks like a man who has seen his own reflection in a muddy puddle and doesn't want to meet its eyes again. The column moves on. Behind you, the schoolyard fades into dust. The blackboard stands blank under the morning sun, chalk circles still visible if you know where to look. The chalk circle. Later that day, the memory of that circle follows you. You see it in the round mouths of canteens, in the hollow eyes of the dead, in the sun itself as it climbs and stares. Every circle promises return, none delivers. You realize that the march has become a kind of education, each checkpoint a lesson, each mile a question you answer with your feet. The subject is endurance. The exam never ends. By noon the horizon wavers again, thick with heat and distance. A truck rumbles past carrying empty barrels. The sound fades, leaving only breathing, thousands of lungs negotiating with air. You walk until the word walk loses meaning, until body and road share the same temperature. The day slides into evening without announcement. Shadows lengthen like arms too tired to lift. Someone ahead begins to hum a lullaby. Another joins, then another, until the tune stretches thin over the line like gauze. It covers nothing, but it helps. The chapter ends on a quiet image. A blackboard forgotten in an empty schoolroom, dust settling over the faint white outline of a circle, still glowing faintly, as if the moon had once been there and promised to return. Chapter 4. Pilar to Balanga. Names become miles. The taxonomy of heat. Morning has no edge any more. It seeps. The light here does not arrive. It thickens. You learn there are kinds of heat that maps never show. The 9 a.m. heat that sits on the back of your neck like a steady hand. The noon heat that shouts in brass tones, drowning insects. The 3 p.m. heat that pretends mercy, loosening its grip just long enough to remind you what mercy feels like. Even shadows wilt. Bayonets droop in mirage. Sweat turns to a paste that glues fabric to skin. Every breath is an argument with the air. The road north curls through a procession of villages. Pilar, Bagak, Balanga. Each name sounds cool when whispered, as if vowels could hold water. They cannot. The letters themselves seem to blister on the tongue. A Filipino scout in front of you counts trees. Every 100 palms, a kilometer, he says. By the 20th palm his voice gives out. The next 100 pass in silence. From the ditches comes the sour smell of algae and decay. Frogs croak once, twice, then think better of it. The jungle is learning discretion. Arithmetic of loss. Someone up the line collapses. The order ripples backward. Keep moving. 2 guards jog past, rifles held horizontal like balancing poles. A single shot punctuates the heat. Conversation ceases for miles. Numbers surface later, when the mind is cooler. Nearly 76,000 captured, thousands to die before nightfall, hundreds each day after. But inside the column, arithmetic simplifies. 1 foot, 1 breath, 1 more tree. A former baseball player from Iowa walks beside a fisherman from Cavite. They share nothing but rhythm. When the fisherman falls, the Iowan reaches out too late. A guard waves him forward. The gap closes as if the man were never there. Somewhere behind, another guard drags a body to the roadside and leaves it with the efficiency of a punctuation mark. The march edits itself. Villagers step out only after the column has passed. They kneel to the fallen, search pockets for identification tags, say a name if they find one. Then they drag the bodies to shade, not out of courage but habit, the island's oldest instinct. Crosscut, the priest of Balanga. In Balanga, a Franciscan priest stays behind after the Japanese requisition his church as a barracks. He hides 2 canteens beneath the altar and waits for the march to arrive. When the first group appears, he slips out through a side door and kneels by the road, pretending to fix a sandal strap. A Filipino soldier stumbles near him. The priest presses a canteen into the man's hand without looking up. Their eyes never meet. Moments later, a guard notices the movement and shouts. The priest rises slowly, dusting his knees, and smiles. The guard hesitates. The gesture disarms him, but then strikes. The canteen bursts, its water fanning across the dust like wings. That night the priest is confined to the sacristy. He spends the hours writing a confession on a page torn from the parish register. At dawn, when he looks out, the road is empty but still shining wet. He takes it as absolution. The language of boots. By afternoon, speech has collapsed into footfall. Every sound repeats. Boots, bayonet rings, flies. The rhythm becomes hypnotic. Step, step, breath, step, step, breath, until thought slides behind it like a passenger. Occasionally, a guard shouts Hayek, hurry. You would if you could. The word itself begins to sound like a heartbeat. A truck passes filled with captured flags, their colors dulled to mud. One corner of the stars and stripes flaps loose, brushing the faces of men who once saluted it. No one reaches out. Touching would make it real. The road north is lined with mango trees. When wind moves through them, they whisper like gossiping relatives at a funeral. Some branches still carry fruit, green and hard. One falls, splits, and rolls into the path. No one dares stoop. A guard kicks it aside, juice splattering his boot. The smell, sharp, sweet, impossible, follows the column for half a mile before fading into dust. Crosscut, radio that no longer calls. Across the bay, Corregidor still resists. Inside its tunnels, a signalman sits before his silent transmitter. He taps out ghost messages anyway. Bataan fallen stop holding until final order stop. No one answers. He removes his headphones and listens instead to the sea pounding the rocks above. It sounds like applause for something finished. He writes in his logbook, heat in air shaft stifling, men in dream state, prayer continuous. The pencil breaks. He sharpens it on his boot sole and keeps writing because writing is proof that sound once had meaning. The road learns your weight. Late day. The sky bruises toward copper. Each step digs a memory into the earth. You realize the road is keeping score. It knows how many feet, how many failures, how many shadows passed. Your legs ache with the logic of debt. 1 mile paid with flesh, the next on credit. When you stumble, The man behind steadies you with his elbow. Neither of you speaks. Gratitude would waste air. The column crosses a field where carabaos once grazed. The animals watch from a distance, flicking their ears at flies, unbothered. One lifts its head and snorts, a sound both ancient and bored. The guards laugh. It is the only laughter you hear all day. At a checkpoint, a guard lowers a bamboo pole to slow the march. The pole squeaks against its hinge. The sound lodges in your mind, a hinge between before and after. You pass beneath it and feel yourself shrink, as if entering someone else's memory. Crosscut. The photographer. Among the guards is a correspondent from Asahi Shimbun, camera slung over one shoulder. He has been told to record the triumph. Through his lens the column becomes pattern, repetition, symmetry, proof of order. He does not smell it. He does not hear the flies. He frames one shot, a group of prisoners walking into sunset, silhouettes perfect against gold haze. It will appear in Tokyo weeks later beneath the caption, Bataan March of Honor. Viewers will see discipline. Only the photographer knows the picture smells of rot. That night he develops the film in a bucket of river water. The negatives come out spotted, eaten by minerals. He hangs them on a wire to dry. A breeze lifts them like thin ghosts. For a moment he believes he hears their voices. He packs the film carefully and never looks at it again. The mango leaf. Dusk again. The road narrows between paddies that mirror the reddening sky. Mud sucks at your heels with small, obscene kisses. Mosquitoes rise in clouds so thick they look like smoke. A mango leaf detaches from a branch above and lands on a soldier's bare shoulder. It clings there, trembling with each step. For an hour it stays, a bright green country traveling north on borrowed skin. When it finally falls, it drifts to the ditch and settles on a pool of stagnant water. Ripples push outward, circles within circles, until they break against mud and disappear. You watch it vanish and feel an absurd grief, as if something innocent has given up. The evening march. Night again. You walk by moonlight, pale and forgiving. The guards grow quiet. Even their anger is tired. Fireflies gather in the trees, tiny lanterns guiding a funeral that never ends. The column breathes in unison. Somewhere a radio crackles with imperial march music, distant and thin. The tune is so faint it sounds like apology. When you finally stop for the night, the ground feels alive beneath you, still moving. You lie down and watch your own chest rise and fall, a reminder that you are still counted among the living for one more mile. The chapter ends on a quiet image. A mango leaf caught in a puddle, its reflection shimmering beside the moon until both become indistinguishable. Chapter 5. San Fernando. Trains without air. The yard. San Fernando arrives not as a town, but as exhaustion drawn in straight lines. Rails cut the dust like scars. Telegraph poles march beside them, each one humming faintly, as if Evenwood remembers orders. The column halts at the edge of the rail yard. Guards shout, counting heads, their voices shredded by fatigue. The sound of boots on gravel replaces the rhythm of the road. For the first time in days, there is the illusion of stillness, though nothing truly rests. You see the pens, bamboo fences, barbed wire strung too low, ground trampled into paste. Men fold into the enclosures like spilled grain. Some lie down instantly, pressing their faces to the soil to smell something that is not heat. Others crouch, wary of becoming motionless in front of watching eyes. Flies bloom on everything, lips, wounds, rations of rice dumped from buckets. The air shivers with their small insistence. A guard waves them away with a bayonet, and they return, fearless. You sit with your back against a telegraph pole and feel it vibrate, messages traveling to somewhere that still has direction. The vibration becomes a phantom heartbeat. Someone beside you murmurs, "Trains. They said there will be trains." He says it like hope, but the tone is closer to warning. Box scars. The trains arrive at noon, engines coughing steam into air that cannot absorb more heat. They are freight cars, the kind used for sugarcane, livestock, or. Their wooden slats are sun-warped, their metal roofs blistered to dull gray. Orders echo. Hi. Move. The first car opens its mouth. Men surge forward, herded with rifle butts and curses. The air inside smells of wood, dung, and something that might be rust. 80 men cram in, then 90, then 100. The doors slam shut. A chain clinks through the latch like laughter that forgot its punchline. Inside, darkness has weight. Shoulders press against shoulders until individuality dissolves. Breath turns to steam, steam turns to sweat, sweat runs down legs and pools on the floorboards. You try to lift an arm and cannot. The skin of strangers sticks to yours. A voice near your ear prays in Spanish, another curses in English, a third mutters in Tagalog about the rain he will never see. Someone pounds the wall. Another joins. The rhythm rises like thunder with no sky to answer it. Guards outside yell back, strike the slats with rifle butts, and the thunder dies in confusion. Light leaks through gaps, thin needles that stitch gold onto faces, then vanish. You learn to measure time by how those needles slide across the wall. When they disappear completely, the car is an oven. The smell changes first, sweat, then urine, then fear. After an hour, words shrink to grunts. After 2, silence returns, thick and crowded. A man near the door collapses. There is no space for falling. He simply tilts, wedged upright by the press of bodies. The next man takes his place in the rhythm of breathing. Survival becomes geometry. Crosscut. The station master. Outside, the Filipino station master stands in the shade of the depot, cap in hand. His job is to signal departure. He studied rail timetables once, believed in precision, in minutes that meant something. Now the schedule is gone, replaced by shouted orders from Japanese officers. He watches as each car is sealed, counts quietly, lips moving. When the last chain locks, he steps forward, salutes, and turns away so no one sees his face. His assistant, a boy of 17, asks if they should write down the train numbers. The station master shakes his head. No one will ask for these records. He looks at the steam drifting upward and says, "Remember the sound instead." When the engines finally groan into motion, the boy covers his ears. The sound is a moan of metal and men combined. The short ride that lasts forever. The distance from San Fernando to Capiz is barely 30 miles. The journey feels longer than the Pacific. Inside the car, air turns into argument. Each breath competes. Men faint standing, others claw at the slats for a slice of wind. Someone near the floor screams that he cannot breathe. A bayonet punctures the roof from outside. One small hole, accidental mercy. A thread of light enters, and every face turns upward as if witnessing a miracle. Through that hole you glimpse a piece of sky the color of forget. It does not look like forgiveness. Minutes, hours, days. Time stops measuring itself. Your senses reorganize. Smell first, then touch, then the slow hum of heartbeat. A body beside you sags. You do not know if he sleeps or leaves. There is no room to check. At each stop, doors slide open to count survivors. Fresh air floods in, cruel in its generosity. The living gasp like fish. The dead are dragged out by their ankles and left beside the tracks. One lands face up in sunlight, his eyes two mirrors no one can bear. The doors close again. The train shudders forward. Wheels grind on rails, a lullaby for madness. The rhythm becomes hypnotic, ka-chunk, like a slow heartbeat too stubborn to quit. You think of rivers again. The sound is similar but kinder. Crosscut, a field beside the tracks. A farmer in Pampanga stands in his rice field as the train passes. The cars are sealed, the gaps too small to see through, but he hears the cries, a muffled chorus, half wind, half human. He removes his straw hat and bows, unsure why. The water around his knees trembles from the vibration. When the sound fades, he stares at the ripples until they smooth. That night he tells his wife, "The trains carried ghosts." She nods, and they leave a bowl of rice by the doorway before sleeping. Capiz platform. The train lurches to its final stop. Doors creak open, hinges stiff from heat. Light floods in, so bright it burns. You stumble out into air too big, lungs confused by its abundance. Men collapse as soon as they touch the ground, limbs folding like empty coats. Guards yell, striking indiscriminately, trying to turn chaos back into formation. A captain counts bodies for transport records. He doesn't finish the math before dusk. On the platform, a Japanese medic sprays disinfectant from a hand pump over the prisoners. The liquid smells sharp, chemical, indifferent. For a second it feels like rain. For a second everyone stands straighter. Then coughing begins again. The next stage is already waiting. Camp O'Donnell, 10 miles more. The guards shout the command to walk. Some cannot. They are lifted by others, carried until the carriers fall too. The road north resumes its old rhythm. Dust, breath, dust. Behind you, the boxcars stand open, dripping condensation that looks like tears. Crosscut, a Japanese photographer. A military photographer documents the arrival. Through his lens, the prisoners look like dark brushstrokes against a pale canvas. He adjusts focus, unaware that the smell of death will cling to the negatives forever. That night he develops the film in a bucket of well water. The images emerge slowly, faces blurred by heat shimmer, eyes white with reflection. On one frame, a prisoner seems to look directly at him. Startled, he scratches the negative, erasing the gaze. When he sends the prints to Manila, he keeps one for himself, an accidental double exposure of train and sky. He hides it in his wallet and years later, back in Tokyo, will show it to no one. The handprint. At Capiz Station, on a wall of corrugated tin, a single handprint glows in grime, dark, deliberate. No one knows who left it. Each new train adds more beneath it until the metal becomes stippled with ghosts. You notice it as you pass, then forget until much later, when memory turns it into a symbol too neat for truth. The road again. You walk the last miles to Camp O'Donnell under a moon that pretends coolness. The ground crunches with the bones of beetles. The guards are quieter now, spent of fury. Even cruelty needs rest. Somewhere ahead, a lantern marks the camp gate. It swings slightly in the breeze, haloed by moths. The light looks gentle, but men who have gone before whisper that it leads to another kind of silence. You step toward it anyway. The feet obey. The mind drifts. Around you, the column breathes in ragged harmony, a choir of endurance. The chapter ends on a quiet image. A single handprint on the side of a train car, smudged by time yet still visible in morning light, proof that once someone reached for air and almost found it. Chapter 6. Camp O'Donnell, the place where waiting breaks. A gate that does not protect. The gate stands crooked, a suggestion more than a boundary. Its sign reads Camp O'Donnell, letters stenciled over old American paint now blistered under the Philippine sun. The wood creaks in the wind, a tired sentinel unsure who it guards. You step through and realize the air is different here, not hotter but older. It smells of damp bamboo, rot, and something sour you can't yet name. The ground is dust over clay, pocked with footprints that never harden because so many pass before they can dry. The camp was once an American training field, barracks, parade ground, water tanks, a chapel without walls. Now it is a geography of neglect. Barbed wire hums faintly in the wind like an old violin string. Latrines fill faster than they can be dug. Tents buckle under their own fatigue. The guards herd you toward an open space. There are no bunks left. The lucky find patches of shade beneath broken roofs. The unlucky kneel in the sun, heads bowed as if in perpetual prayer. When night comes, it does not cool the air. It only hides the smell. A doctor from Wisconsin counts the new arrivals. Thousands more each hour. He has no medicine, only lists. His handwriting grows smaller with every page, as if rationing ink the way the men ration breath. You hear the word whispered for the first time. Dysentery. It moves through the camp faster than rumor. So does malaria, fever, despair. They learn to share the same body. Disease learns your name. It begins in the gut, then the blood, then the eyes. Men grow translucent, as if light can't stand to stay in them. Skin loosens. Bones introduce themselves through thin curtains of flesh. The hospital area is a stretch of grass with canvas draped over poles. Its soundtrack, coughing, flies, and the soft slosh of contaminated water ladled from barrels. Orderlies, barefoot, sleepless, move between bodies, unsure who is patient and who is already beyond verbs. Filipino soldiers die fastest. Their rations cut, their medicine none. Graves are shallow, dug with helmets, marked by twigs. Americans follow, slower but steady, a grim rhythm of alternating flags. You volunteer for burial detail because the air there is slightly cleaner. The work has a kind of dignity. Names written, tags tied, the earth given purpose. A priest recites the same psalm until it loses grammar. Yea, though I walk, the rest is swallowed by the wind. Every morning you wake to fewer sounds. The camp is learning silence. Even the guards speak less. There are too many to punish. A dead man teaches obedience perfectly. Crosscut. The nurse at Bilibid. In Manila, 70 miles away, a Filipino nurse named Nelia tends the hospital at Bilibid prison. She boils instruments in the same pot where she once cooked rice. Her uniform is gray from washing. She keeps a small notebook of names, the men she's treated, the ones she couldn't save. Each name written carefully, almost lovingly, in fountain pen ink scavenged from a Japanese officer's desk. She knows the names will vanish into archives or rot, but she writes anyway. It is a way of holding. At night, she dreams of Camp O'Donnell, though she's never been there. She sees fields turning grey, men queuing for a ladle of water, a chapel made of air. In the dream, she keeps walking toward them, but never arrives. When she wakes, she hums a lullaby her mother used to sing, Son Coman Narun, Narun Dinong Dios. Wherever you are, God is there. She does not believe it fully, but belief is not the point. It's the rhythm that matters. The arithmetic of survival. You begin to trade in fractions. 1 spoon of rice equals 1 hour of work. 1 swallow of water equals 10 more minutes upright. Everything measurable becomes sacred. Some men hoard their rations, hiding them under dirt floors, but rats learn faster than greed. Others trade cigarettes for a crust of bread, for aspirin, for a story. The stories are the best currency, cheap to tell, expensive to forget. A corporal recounts Chicago winters, the smell of gasoline on snow, the way frost carves halos around street lamps. His listener, a young Filipino recruit, offers a tale of Toll Lake glowing red at sunset. Both men die within a week, their words lingering like smoke. At dusk, you count the living in your corner, 31 yesterday, 28 today. A ledger in your head keeps score. The numbers are quiet but honest. One evening, you find a scrap of mirror glass in the dirt. You clean it with your sleeve and stare. The face that looks back is foreign, eyes sunken, skin patterned in dust, beard uneven. You realize you could walk past yourself now and never recognize the stranger. You tuck the glass into your pocket anyway. Memory needs proof. Crosscut, the officer's report. At headquarters in Tarlac, an Imperial Japanese officer compiles daily summaries for Tokyo. He writes, Camp O'Donnell functioning normally. Prisoners adjusted to labor detail. Minor disease outbreak being contained. He files the report neatly. Later, when a clerk asks about the rising death toll, he replies, They are soldiers. They understand fate. The clerk nods. Neither speaks again. Outside, cicadas sing as if nothing on the island has changed. The well. Water becomes mythology. There is one functioning pump in the entire camp. Every morning, a queue forms before dawn. Hundreds of men, canteens clinking like rosary beads. The pump groans with each stroke, coughing brown liquid that clears only after the 10th bucket. Fights break out over place in line. Guards intervene with rifle butts. Blood and water mix, drying into the same pattern on the ground. A chaplain near the back of the queue carries a tin cup tied to his belt. When his turn comes, he fills it halfway, then passes it to the man behind him. God first, he says. The man drinks greedily and thanks him with silence. Later, when the chaplain's body is carried to the burial ground, that same man unties the cup from his belt and places it on the fresh mound. The next morning, rain collects inside it, a small, shining mercy. The mathematics of memory. As weeks pass, memory becomes a form of structure. Men recite lists of things they once knew, baseball lineups, street names, ingredients for adobo, lines of Shakespeare. The recitations create order where none remains. At night, someone whispers, "Tell me a color." You close your eyes and answer, "Green." What kind of green? Like mango leaves in April. Silence follows, heavy with shared imagination. Others remember sounds, the squeal of streetcars, church bells, the hiss of rain on tin roofs. They replay them until they sound real. It is how the brain protects itself from forgetting what comfort used to sound like. Crosscut, the grave detail. Burial detail again. You walk beyond the wire, shovel over shoulder. The graves are laid in rows, shallow because the earth resists. Each body wrapped in whatever cloth is left. uniform, blanket, flag fragment. A Japanese sergeant supervises, chain smoking. He does not interfere. He only counts aloud. When his voice reaches 100, he lights another cigarette. One day you dig beside a field of wild lilies. Their scent mixes with decay, producing an odd sweetness that makes your throat tighten. You realize the smell will haunt you more than any face. When you finish, you plant one lily on the nearest mound. The sergeant notices but says nothing. The next day there are 3 lilies, then 7. By week's end, the graves bloom like a small rebellion. Night and its small mercies. Night returns with crickets and fever dreams. Stars hang indifferent above the camp, bright enough to mock. The moonlight turns the barbed wire into lace. It is beautiful, and that makes it worse. Someone plays a harmonica, a weak, uneven tune that manages to find melody anyway. Men turn toward it as if warmth could be drawn from sound. When it stops, no one asks why. The silence that follows feels earned. You lie awake, counting breaths. Somewhere nearby, a man mutters, "Tomorrow." The word sounds like both promise and curse. Dawn comes late, shy. The light feels thin, reluctant to commit. You stand and watch mist rising from the burial field, curling around the lilies like smoke from invisible incense. The chapter ends on a quiet image. A tin cup balanced beneath a dripping tap, each drop landing with the same soft patience as prayer, collecting proof that, for now, time is still moving. Chapter 7. Guard, Prisoner, Witness. The guard who avoids mirrors. He refuses to look into water, not the puddles that form after rare rain, not the metal of his bayonet, not the enamel bowl that holds his rice. He knows what reflection can do to a man. His name, if you heard it, would sound ordinary, Private Takeda, 25th Regiment, but in this place names thin into rank and duty. He is neither cruel nor kind. He is what orders make of him. Each morning he polishes his rifle until it gleams, careful not to angle the barrel toward his face. When the prisoners shuffle past for roll call, he counts in whispers, "Ichi-san." The rhythm steadies him. The column moves like a tide he can neither stop nor understand. He tells himself these men are enemies, but they look more like ghosts. Translucent skin, hollow cheeks, eyes that hold nothing he can recognize. Sometimes, when he wakes at night to the sound of coughing, he almost forgets who the prisoners are supposed to be. For a second, they are just people trying not to disappear. He thinks of home, rice fields outside Shikoku, his father's hands stained with soil, his sister's laugh across the veranda. Memory is a dangerous indulgence here, but he lets it come anyway, small doses between orders. At dawn he takes guard post near the well. A prisoner approaches with a tin cup, trembling from fever. Takeda hesitates before barking the usual command. Instead, he nods once. The man fills the cup, drinks, nods back. Nothing is spoken. Both pretend the moment didn't happen. Later that day, Takeda will slap another prisoner for stumbling. He does it harder than necessary to pay off the debt of mercy. Balance must be restored. That night he lies awake and sees the reflection of his own eyes in the rifle's bolt. For the first time, he does not look away. The prisoner who counts clouds. He was an accountant once. Numbers comforted him, their obedience, their lack of malice. Here, nothing behaves that way, so he invents his own equations. He counts clouds. Each afternoon, lying in the yard between roll calls, he studies the sky through the barbed wire. Cirrus, cumulus, nimbus. He gives them nicknames: Escape, Memory, maybe Rain. He teaches a Filipino teenager nearby the classifications. The boy, barely 19, listens intently, repeating the Latin names like prayers. The two of them create a school of the sky. When the guards notice them pointing upward, one asks what they are doing. The prisoner answers, "Studying the weather, sir." The guard grunts, unamused. The clouds keep drifting, curriculum intact. One afternoon, the accountant sees a formation shaped like a ship with sails. He whispers, "Liberty." The boy laughs, a sound that startles everyone nearby. Laughter is contraband here, rarer than quinine. The next morning, the sky is blank, blue as paper waiting for words. The boy dies of fever before noon. The accountant doesn't look at the sky that day. When night comes, stars prick holes in the darkness. He counts them too, because that's what he knows how to do. Numbers still obey him, even if nothing else does. The villager who brings bananas. Outside the wire, beyond the guard shacks and the smell, a woman lives in a hut with walls made of woven palm. Each morning she gathers bananas from her small grove and leaves them in the grass near the perimeter where she knows the patrol seldom walks. At first it's one banana, then two. By the third day, someone inside notices. A hand reaches through the wire, hesitant, then quick. The fruit disappears. She hears a faint sound. Thank you, maybe, or just breath. She keeps doing it, always at dawn, always silent. Some days the bananas vanish before sunrise. Other days they rot in the heat, untouched. She never stops. One morning she steps closer, too close. A guard spots movement and shouts. She freezes, heart drumming. Another guard, the one who never smiles, lifts his rifle but doesn't fire. He gestures for her to go. She nods and retreats into the jungle's green shadow. After that, she leaves no more fruit. The soldiers eventually forget her. The prisoners don't. Months later, when bananas appear in rations again, one man peels his slowly, reverently, as if tasting the memory of her courage. Crosscut, the chaplain's ledger. Inside the camp's chapel, little more than a rectangle of air bounded by bamboo poles, a chaplain keeps a ledger of the dead. Each entry a name, nationality, cause, and date. He writes in tiny letters to save paper. When the pages fill, he begins again on the margins, then over the lines, layering one list atop another until the ink becomes unreadable. God will separate them, he whispers, the way the tide sorts shells. A guard asks once what he's writing. The chaplain answers, "Inventory." The guard shrugs, indifferent. He doesn't know the word for mercy written small. The witness without a camera. There is no camera here, only memory trying to imitate one. The scenes arrange themselves. A guard handing a pebble of salt to a prisoner, pretending it fell from his pocket. A doctor breaking a thermometer because he cannot bear to measure another fever. A man drawing a cross in the dust and erasing it before anyone sees. A pair of boots left at the gate, their owner carried out before sunrise. Each image burns without film, engraving itself in air. The witnesses multiply, though none will ever think of themselves that way. Crosscut, the interpreter. Between guards and prisoners stands the interpreter, a Filipino man conscripted for the task. He was once a teacher in Angeles. Now his words are uniforms for others' orders. When a guard shouts, he translates. When a prisoner pleads, he translates again. He knows the difference between words and meaning, but has stopped pointing it out. At night he writes notes in a tiny notebook hidden in his shoe. Dates, orders, names of those who disappeared. He intends to survive long enough to tell someone, though he's not sure who will listen. Years later, that notebook will be found buried under floorboards during reconstruction. The ink will have faded, but the indentations will remain, legible by touch. The Guard and the Pebble. Private Takeda again. The fever has spread to his own men now. He watches a fellow guard shiver through the night, eyes wide and glassy. The next morning that guard is gone, carried to a ditch outside the fence. The line between conqueror and captive narrows to a thread. During inspection, Takeda spots a prisoner limping, bare feet wrapped in rags. He gestures for him to stop, pretends to check the binding, then presses something into the man's palm, a small white pebble. "Salt," he mutters. The man stares, uncomprehending, until taste explains. Takeda walks away before gratitude can become betrayal. That night, he dreams of the pebble rolling in the surf, smoothing itself against other stones. He wakes with the sound of waves in his ears, though the nearest sea is miles away. The Prisoner Who Draws. Another prisoner, a Filipino draftsman before the war, finds a piece of charcoal near the burned mess hall. He uses it to draw on the baroque walls, lines of faces, mountains, the silhouettes of ships he's never seen. The drawings multiply, small as postage stamps, tucked between cracks in the boards. When guards notice, they laugh, calling it superstition. He keeps drawing anyway. Each face he sketches is someone who's gone, brought back through line and shadow. "I'm teaching the wood to remember," he whispers. One morning the wall is scrubbed clean. That night he starts again on the floor. Decades later, during restoration, faint traces of charcoal will still be visible, ghosts written in grain. Witness. No camera, no photograph, only this. A guard who learns the taste of shame and still follows orders. A prisoner who names clouds so the sky will not forget him. A villager who risks everything for a piece of fruit. A chaplain who writes names smaller than mercy itself. An interpreter who translates grief into ledger lines. A draftsman who draws until the wood remembers. You, who see them now, are the camera they never had. The chapter ends on a quiet image. A single banana leaf caught in the wire, edges curling in the wind, green fading to brown. It flutters like a flag that no nation claims, whispering both warning and forgiveness. Chapter 8. Letters That Found No One. The Post That Never Came. You sit on a crate outside the baroque wall, holding a scrap of paper that once belonged to a Japanese supply ledger. The column of kanji down one side makes it look official, almost respectable, something the world might keep. You write anyway, not to be read, but to exist. Dear Mother. The pencil begins, its point already blunt. I am alive. We are waiting for the rains. The camp is called O'Donnell. It is not far, though it feels like another planet. The words crawl across the page like men on a long road. The sentences break often, gasping for air. You describe the heat, the dust, the way the sky refuses clouds. You do not mention the dead. You write instead about a tree near the gate where sparrows land each morning, as if routine were proof that the world still remembers its schedule. The letter ends simply, "Tell everyone I am fine. Tell the water I will come home someday." You fold it carefully, twice. No envelope. You tuck it into the seam of your shirt, close to the skin, as if the heart could act as postmark. It will never leave this place. Around you, men are writing too, on cardboard, wood scraps, bits of cloth. Some compose entire novels in their heads, sentences recited under breath like rosaries. Others write single words, wife, son, dog, because whole stories cost too much. At night, the guards collect the visible letters for inspection. Most end up burned. Smoke becomes the only delivery system left. News like weather. News doesn't arrive. It drifts. Rumor is the only broadcaster. A guard mentions a battle near Midway. A prisoner swears he overheard an officer say, "Tokyo bombed." Another insists the Americans have landed in Australia with planes faster than birds. Each report is repeated, reshaped, refined until it fits the listener's hunger. Hope is rationed like rice, small portions, unevenly distributed. A Filipino soldier claims to have seen a secret coded signal at dusk, 3 lanterns on a hillside, flickering twice, pausing, then once more. He calls it proof of rescue. Others squint toward the ridge and see nothing but fireflies. Still, for that night, everyone sleeps lighter. Morning erases everything. The sun returns, punctual as ever. The camp's commander posts a notice in both English and Japanese. Rumors of rescue will be punished as resistance. The notice flaps in wind, its paper thin enough to see daylight through. It looks almost translucent, like skin stretched too far. Yet even the guards crave news. They ask prisoners for translations of Allied radio phrases printed in intercepted leaflets. Islands secured. Enemy retreating. Some laugh, pretending disbelief. Others stare too long. Everyone wants to know who's winning, as if victory might provide shade. Crosscut. Homer's Reckoning. Years later, General Masaharu Homer will stand in a courtroom in Manila, the war already lost. He will look thinner, quieter, and older than his own photographs. The trial will smell of disinfectant and irony, law dressed in the uniform of vengeance. Translators will shuffle papers. Prosecutors will read aloud numbers like curses. Miles marched, prisoners counted, bodies found. Witnesses will describe beatings, shootings, the box scars, the thirst. The words will hang in air that no longer belongs to either side. Homer will listen through headphones, nodding occasionally, perhaps at memory, perhaps at noise. He will say, "I did not order these acts." He will say, "I regret what happened." The court will say, "Command responsibility." His wife will write from Japan, "They say you were a poet once." He will reply, "A poet forgets the weight of boots." When the verdict comes, guilty, death by firing squad, he will close his eyes, not in fear, but in the same weary courtesy he once used to end meetings. The sentence will be carried out quietly at dawn. None of this helps the dead, but history needs endings, even when mercy has none left to give. Crosscut. The man who read the news. In San Fernando, long after the war, a barber sweeps his shop floor and finds a rusted dog tag beneath the planks. He cleans it, reads the name, and places it in a box beside old razors. That evening, listening to the radio announce the general's execution, he holds the tag and wonders which name should feel heavier, the prisoner's or the general's. He decides weight is democratic. It belongs to everyone. The return of rain. Rain arrives without warning. The first drop lands on your forearm, a cool pinprick that startles more than it soothes. Then the sky opens completely, as if a curtain tears. Men crawl from huts and barracks, lifting faces to the deluge. Some laugh, others cry without sound. The guards retreat beneath roofs, confused by a joy that costs nothing. The rain tastes of rust, smoke, maybe forgiveness. It fills every dent, every helmet left on the ground. Canteens open like mouths. The mud churns into chaos, and no one cares. For one night the camp is alive again, steam rising from bodies, songs from throats that forgot melody. A doctor uses his hands to collect water for the sick. A chaplain whispers blessings that sound like breathing. The rain continues until dawn, drumming the roofs like applause. When it stops, the camp smells of wet earth, decay, and brief hope. By noon, fever takes most of the joy back. But not all. Not completely. A few men hide cups of rainwater under their shirts, saving it for later, proof that the sky can still remember kindness. Crosscut. The diary. Somewhere in the barracks, a man keeps a diary on the backs of Red Cross labels peeled from discarded crates. He writes in pencil stolen from a guardhouse. Each entry is dated, though days have lost meaning. He records details. Number of deaths that morning. Temperature at noon, too hot for air. Condition of the well. Rumor of liberation, absurd but pleasant. On the last page he writes, "Rain today. Smell of earth reminded me of my wife's garden. I dreamed of her hands pulling weeds, gentle as confession." The diary ends mid-sentence. When the camp is liberated in 1945, the notebook will be found under a plank, its edges chewed by termites. The final words are incomplete but legible. We will. The sentence never finishes. Maybe that's the point. The telegrams. Months later, telegrams cross oceans. In Iowa, New York, Manila, and Cebu, mothers and wives open envelopes stamped War Department and read the same careful phrasing. The War Department regrets to inform you. Some letters carry the word missing. Others say presumed dead. A few, rarer still, say returned safely, and are held so tightly the paper creases into the shape of a prayer. In one farmhouse, a mother lays the telegram on the table beside a loaf of cooling bread. She does not cry. She takes a knife and cuts the bread evenly, 6 slices, and calls her family to eat. The bread tastes of salt, though no one added any. In Manila, Nelia, the nurse from Bilibid, reads names from the newspaper list of recovered prisoners. She runs her finger down the column, stops at one familiar surname, and closes her eyes. She doesn't know if it's her patient or another with the same name, but she whispers Salamat, thank you, anyway. Memories Post Office. Decades pass. The camp becomes a memorial. Trees grow where barracks once stood. Tourists walk quietly, reading plaques, photographing rusted artifacts arranged like altars. Every April, old men arrive in wheelchairs, their medals clinking like soft bells. They speak little. The air does the talking. One veteran holds up a plastic bag containing a single, browned envelope, the letter he wrote in the camp but never sent. He lays it on the stone marker, its paper fluttering in the breeze, and whispers, "Delivered." Wind lifts the page. It dances once, twice, and settles among flowers. A schoolchild watching asks her teacher, "Who are these men?" The teacher answers, "They are what letters sound like when someone finally reads them." The girl doesn't fully understand, but she memorizes the line. Later she will use it in an essay about history and silence. It will win a contest. Her prize, a notebook. She will fill it with questions. The sky that wrote back. At dusk, clouds gather over the memorial, thick, bruised, almost purple. Thunder rumbles far off, gentle as a drum roll from another century. A veteran tilts his head, smiling faintly. "Rain again," he says. They always come with the rain. The first drops fall on the stone names, darkening them one by one. For a few moments the letters shine, legible and alive. Then water runs down, blurring them into anonymity once more. You imagine those raindrops as ink, messages written backward by the sky to the ground, simple and eternal. Remember. Forgive. Remember. The chapter ends on a quiet image. A letter left open on the memorial stone, rain spreading its ink until the words become one color, blue-gray, like distance softened by time. Chapter 9. After the Road. Memory's Perimeter. Survivor's Arithmetic. Liberation came not with trumpets, but with coughing. Men woke to the sound of boots, American this time, and could not decide whether to cheer or hide. Their bodies did not understand joy. It felt too much like fever. When the gates opened in early 1945, only a fraction stepped through under their own power. Of the 76,000 who began the march, less than half remained alive. Of those, many carried malaria in their blood and ghosts in their lungs. A medic wrote in his log, "They weigh less than their shadows." The liberating soldiers brought rations, cigarettes, clean water. They also brought mirrors. Some prisoners turned away. Others stared as if meeting an ancestor. One man laughed until his voice cracked. Another touched his face and whispered, "I thought you died." They were fed carefully, spoonfuls at a time, because abundance can kill the starved. Some did die, from the shock of plenty. Others refused food, convinced it was another trick of survival. When reporters arrived, cameras clicked in the same rhythm as machine guns once had. The survivors posed awkwardly, their ribs casting thin shadows, eyes hollow but direct. Headlines called them heroes of Bataan. They didn't feel heroic. They felt like unfinished sentences. That night, when the first plane lifted them away from Luzon, one man turned to another and said, "Do you think the road will notice we're gone?" The other man didn't answer. He was already asleep, dreaming of walking, always walking. The Road Revisited. Years later, when the world has gone fluorescent and noisy, some return. They come with sons and daughters, or alone, tracing the old route by jeep and foot. The villages have changed. Concrete houses, satellite dishes, karaoke machines, but the heat has not. At Marival's, the sea still smells of salt and iron. At Pilar, school children line the streets for the annual Remembrance Walk, waving paper flags. Their voices are bright, unburdened. The veterans smile, unsure whether to envy or bless them. One stops at a culvert where he remembers a friend falling. The ditch is overgrown now, the earth thick with vines. He kneels anyway, touches the soil, and whispers the friend's name. A local farmer passing by pauses, removes his hat, and does the same. The march route is marked now by stone pillars, white, waist-high, numbered every kilometer. Each marker carries the same inscription, Death March Route, April 1942. Cars rush past without slowing, but the stones keep count. In Balanga, the veteran stands at the plaza where the bridge once groaned under weight. The river beneath looks calm, almost polite. He throws a handful of rice into it. "For the thirsty," he says. At Capis, the memorial tower rises 200 feet into the sky, steel lattice, sunlight slipping through. At its base, names are carved in granite. He runs his fingers over them, tracing grooves that still feel warm. He finds some he remembers, some he doesn't, and some that sound like his own. When he closes his eyes, he hears the road again, the murmur of feet, the hiss of dust, the faint chime of metal. The sound has softened over time, like a language fading into dream. Crosscut, the classroom again. Elsewhere, another April. In a classroom not far from where the march began, a teacher writes Bataan in capital letters across a chalkboard. The students watch, silent. Outside, a mango tree leans against the window, its leaves casting moving shadows on the floor. The teacher speaks softly. This is not only history, it is geography of endurance. It happened here, where we stand. She tells them about the march, the camps, the men who came home and the ones who didn't. She doesn't show the worst photographs, she describes smells instead, the heat, the dust, the waiting. Smells are harder to forget. When she finishes, she doesn't erase the word Bataan. She leaves it on the board all day. By afternoon, the letters have smudged into faint white ghosts. The janitor who cleans the room that evening pauses before wiping them away. He whispers a short prayer he learned from his grandfather, who walked the road and never spoke of it again. The quiet ceremony. Every April 9th, the veterans who can still stand gather at the Kapis National Shrine. They arrive in wheelchairs, on crutches, guided by younger hands. The Philippine and American flags rise side by side, their cloths snapping gently in the wind like conversation. A chaplain in white robes steps forward. His voice, amplified, trembles slightly but holds steady. We remember not the cruelty of men, but the endurance of the spirit. Around the monument, families place flowers, white chrysanthemums, yellow sampaguita, red roses. A brass band plays softly, "Abide with me." A child tugs at her grandfather's sleeve. "Was it very bad?" she asks. He looks at her, at the sky, at the ground. "It was long," he says. "That's all." After the speeches, the veterans remove their caps. Silence follows, deeper than applause. Even the birds seem to hold their breath. For a moment, the air itself feels sacred, the way it did on the first day of rain in the camp, the way it does whenever memory chooses to be kind. Crosscut, the historian's archive. In a dim university library in Manila, a historian catalogues letters and diaries from the march. She wears gloves and works quietly, almost reverently. Each envelope she opens releases a small gust of dust and ghost air. She pauses over one line written in pencil, "Tell the water I will come home someday." The graphite has faded, but the intent has not. She copies it into her notes. Later, when she writes her book, that line becomes the title. When the manuscript is done, she places her draft beside the original letters and closes the box. On its lid she writes, "To be opened again when someone forgets why kindness matters." Crosscut, the guard's son. In Shizuoka, Japan, a middle-aged man opens a chest of his late father's belongings. Inside, folded in cloth, he finds a military diary written in careful script. The entries describe Luzon, heat, dust, prisoners, fatigue. At the very end, a line reads, "I gave a man salt. I hope it helped." The son reads it twice, then 3 times. He doesn't know which man his father meant, or if the story is true, but the sentence feels like a key to something half buried. He copies it onto a small piece of paper and tucks it into his wallet. Years later, traveling to the Philippines on business, he will visit the Kapis shrine and leave that note at the base of the memorial. It will blow away before anyone reads it. That's enough. Crosscut, the Filipino farmer. Not far from the old route, a farmer ploughs a field. His father once saw the march pass this very place. Sometimes he still finds rusted buttons in the soil, dull brass tokens of history. He keeps them in a tin box on a shelf near the family altar. When his youngest son asks what they are, he says, "They belong to men who kept walking." The boy nods, not really understanding, and pockets one of the buttons. It becomes his lucky charm. Years later, when the boy is grown and working in the city, he'll touch the button before every difficult day. The edge will wear smooth, the engraving vanish, but the habit will remain. The Museum of Silence. Some memories need walls. In Tarlac, a small museum stands near the former campsite. Inside, the air is cool and respectful. Displays line the corridors. Uniforms, dog tags, letters, a canteen dented by a bullet, a map of the march etched in glass. Visitors move slowly, whispering without realizing it. In one corner, a glass case holds a small tin cup. A plaque reads, "Used by prisoners at Camp O'Donnell. Rainwater collection vessel." Children press their faces to the glass. "It's so small," one says. "Yes," replies the guide, "but it once held a lifetime." Outside, the museum garden is planted with white lilies, the same kind that once grew beside the graves. They sway in the wind, nodding as if to an invisible rhythm. Memory's perimeter. The road still exists. Trucks roar over it, tires hissing on asphalt, unaware of the bones beneath. Time has paved over pain, but not erased it. At sunset, the light turns the pavement bronze. You imagine the road inhaling, dust of memory rising, then settling again. The perimeter of remembrance stretches outward, invisible but alive. Somewhere along the route, a child kicks a can. It rolls, rattling, then stops. The sound echoes farther than it should. You close your eyes and hear again the march, not the cruelty, not the orders, but the rhythm of endurance. Step, breath, dust, silence. It is faint, but it's there. It will always be there. The chapter ends on a quiet image. A road at dusk, empty except for a single shadow that could belong to anyone. Guard, prisoner, villager, or traveler, stretching long, then fading into the evening light. Epilogue. The wind that remembers. Morning rises slow over Luzon. It is the kind of light that forgives everything it touches. Ruins, rivers, even names carved in stone. The grass along the old road bends under dew, each blade bowed in quiet ceremony. Birds return to the telephone wires, reclaiming the geometry of song. You stand where the march began and ended, and began again, in memory, in retelling, in the endless echo of footsteps through time. The air tastes clean now, a mixture of salt, soil, and something almost sweet. Decades have passed, but the road keeps its shape. Listen. There it is, the faint sound of boots against earth, soft as heartbeat. Not ghosts, just history breathing. You follow the road north for a while, passing fields newly planted, towns rebuilt, children walking to school with their shirts half tucked and laughter trailing behind them. They do not look haunted. That is how healing works. It hides inside ordinary things. At Marival's, fishermen mend nets in the same salt breeze that once carried gunpowder. At Balanga, a tricycle hums past, the driver whistling. At Capis, the memorial tower shines in morning light, its steel ribs catching sun the way a spine catches breath. You stop there, at the base of the tower. The metal hums faintly, like the low note of a bell that never learned to stop ringing. The walls around it list names, so many names they blur into texture, like rain falling on water. You trace a finger over one, then another, until you realize it doesn't matter which. They all answer to the same silence. Wind moves through the lattice. It carries the smell of lilies, rust, and time. Somewhere nearby, a veteran sits beneath a tree, eyes closed, lips moving in prayer. You can't hear the words, but you know the rhythm. Gratitude, grief, release. The road beyond the gate glows pale under the rising sun. Trucks pass, commuters hurry, children point at the monument and ask questions. Their teachers answer with stories that have softened around the edges but still hold their shape. It is enough. You walk a little further, just enough to hear the wind shift. It brushes the leaves, the stones, the old rails, the air itself, making a sound like breath drawn after a long silence. That's when you understand. The wind doesn't remember pain, only persistence. It remembers the shape of movement, the discipline of endurance. It has carried ashes, prayers, songs, and now it carries you. You stand still and let it pass through. It smells faintly of rain. Somewhere behind you, thunder murmurs, a language of distance, never threat. You look up and see clouds gathering, not dark but luminous, rolling like thoughts too heavy to keep. Rain begins again, light and clean. It dots the ground where shadows once fell, polishes the memorial stones until each name gleams anew. Drops slide down your arm, collecting at your wrist before falling, small baptisms for a world that almost forgot how to grieve gently. In the distance, a child's voice calls out and laughter answers. Life insists, as it always does. You whisper one last thing to the air, not a prayer, not even words, just the exhale of remembrance made soft by time. The wind takes it, lifts it toward the trees, and lets it go. When the rain fades, only the sound of leaves remains, a rustling like paper turning pages. The story has ended, but it keeps being read. If you found quiet here, keep it. If you found sorrow, let it teach you mercy. If you found endurance, pass it on to someone who will need it more. The sky clears, wide and forgiving. Light drifts across the fields where the road once burned. It touches every scar and calls it history. You breathe. The wind answers. Somewhere, a bell rings, soft, steady, endless. Aftermath. The road that kept their names. The road is quiet now. Grass has reclaimed its edges, soft and green, as if the earth has finally grown tired of remembering blood. Palm shadows sway across it, long and slow, turning the dust gold instead of red. You walk where thousands once stumbled, a line of men stretched thin between hunger and heat. The air hums with cicadas, ordinary and endless, and that ordinariness hurts more than the silence ever did. They called it a march, but there was no rhythm in it. It was a surrender turned inside out, a trail of bodies mistaken for movement. 80 miles of thirst and disbelief, under a sun that never blinked. You can almost hear it still, the scrape of boots against gravel, the rasp of breath too dry to matter. The sound of men counting steps, because counting was the only thing that didn't require hope. You stop beside a tree that has outlived everything. Its bark is pocked with initials carved by hands that refused to disappear quietly. Each letter a protest, each groove a heartbeat. The wind presses through its branches with a low, steady sound, part hymn, part memory. They were soldiers once. But out here, uniforms dissolved. Nationalities blurred under the same sweat and dust. A man from Kansas and a man from Manila could trade the same canteen, the same curse, the same prayer. What separated them on maps meant nothing when thirst made everyone a single word: human. The survivors would remember the heat most of all, how it lived under the skin even at night. The smell of decay that no wind could carry away. The eyes of the guards, sharp with fear pretending to be power. And the road itself, stretching like an argument that refused to end. You look toward the horizon. It wavers in the light, as if distance still doesn't trust what it sees. Beyond it lie the camps, the years, the slow arithmetic of survival. One meal, one disease, one more day. Some made it home. Most did not. But even those who lived carried the road inside them. The dust, the silence, the long unlearning of how to trust footsteps again. In towns nearby, life continued. Children played in courtyards while the column passed. Mothers boiled rice that never reached their sons. War does that, folds horror into the ordinary, teaches the sky to hold two truths at once. Blue above, despair below. Light that refuses to choose sides. Decades later, monuments rose, stone markers along the route, names etched into bronze that grows warm under the same sun. People come here now with cameras and bottled water, following the path in comfort. They read the plaques, whisper the statistics, try to imagine. But imagination falters where endurance begins. Some distances can only be understood by walking them once and never again. You kneel and press your palm to the soil. It's dry, but not dead. The earth has learned to live with memory, not by forgetting, but by absorbing. Somewhere below, the bones of the lost rest with the roots of the living. Their story has become the road itself, rough, scarred, unbroken. The wind rises. Leaves drift across the track like slow confessions. A truck passes in the far distance, its rumble fading into the hills. For a moment, the air feels the same as it must have then, thick, salt-sweet, uncertain. You close your eyes and hear them again, the shuffle, the breath, the faint sound of someone still walking. What they carried was not just pain. It was proof. Proof that the body can fail and the will still hold. Proof that even in cruelty's longest hour, compassion can survive. A hand under an arm, a whisper of water shared from a cap. Small mercies that kept humanity alive when the world tried to kill it. Even now, their footsteps don't end here. They continue in every act of endurance that follows, in every soldier who resists despair, in every person who learns to keep walking through their own long heat. Because the road never belonged to death. It belonged to those who refused to stop. The sun drops low, and the dust glows like embers. The shadows stretch long, pointing always forward. You breathe, slow and steady. The air tastes of rust and rain, of endings that promise nothing except remembrance. What we learned, and what still walks beside us. History doesn't end where the road does. It keeps walking, quietly, in the language of repetition. Every time we think the world has grown past cruelty, it reappears, not as a uniform, but as a policy, not as a march, but as a border, not in heat and dust, but in indifference. The Bataan Death March is not just an old tragedy. It's a mirror, one we keep setting down and picking up again. It showed us what happens when mercy becomes conditional, when human worth is measured by power, and when obedience begins to sound like logic. It showed us that civilization can vanish not in fire, but in silence, in the small moments when people stop seeing each other as real. What the men on that road endured was not only physical torment, but the erasure of identity. They were turned into numbers, bodies, burdens. And when we look closely, we see that pattern repeating. Whenever a refugee line forms at a border, whenever captives are paraded as warning instead of rescued as humans, whenever those in charge learn to deafen themselves to the cries that don't fit their agenda. The uniforms have changed. The vocabulary is different. But the act of reducing life to logistics is the same. From Bataan, we learned that cruelty often disguises itself as order. That ordinary people, placed in extraordinary systems, can forget how to recognize pain in others. And that empathy, left unattended, freezes like blood in the sun. It took decades for the survivors to speak of what they saw. Even then, many said the hardest part was not the march itself. It was the disbelief of those who heard their story afterward. To suffer is one thing. To not be believed is another. So what do we do with their lesson now? Perhaps the answer is smaller than we think. Maybe it begins in the act of noticing. Noticing the quiet forms of cruelty around us, neglect, hunger, exclusion, and naming them before they harden into systems. Maybe it begins by asking the question, would I have seen them? Would I have stopped? Because the road from Bataan is still being walked. By prisoners of new wars. By migrants carrying their children through deserts and seas. By anyone who has been told they don't belong in the place their feet are standing. Every generation inherits a version of that march, a test of compassion measured not in miles, but in how far we're willing to walk toward someone else's pain. And yet, we also inherit something else, the proof that endurance can outlive cruelty, that even in the most brutal landscapes, kindness still appears, a hand sharing water, a glance saying keep going. Those small gestures are the opposite of oblivion. They are what keep humanity from collapsing entirely into history. The story of Bataan warns us that evil does not begin with monsters. It begins with people who forget to imagine themselves in another's place. And so remembering becomes an act of resistance. To tell this story, calmly, truthfully, without spectacle, is to keep the road from being erased. Because every time someone listens, another step is taken in the other direction, away from cruelty toward conscience. So as the light fades on that long road, don't turn away. Look at it, walk it in your mind, and understand that history's echoes are not ghosts. They're guides. They remind us what not to repeat, and what must never be forgotten again. Thank you for listening. You've been part of Echoes of War, where stories rise on quiet wings, and the past still circles above us, refusing to land.